help me sing.
All right, with less than 11 days to go until Election Day, both candidates are leaning on celebrities like Beyoncé. A source tells CNN that the singer will take the stage at Kamala Harris's rally tonight in her hometown of Houston, Texas, Beyoncé's hometown of Houston, Texas. Thursday, Harris was joined by the likes of Barack Obama, Bruce Springsteen, Spike Lee, and Samuel L. Jackson in the swing state of Georgia. Likewise, Donald Trump has also received celebrity endorsements, among them wrestling star Hulk Hogan, former NASCAR driver Danica Patrick, and actor Dennis Quaid, who spoke at a Trump rally at Coachella this month.
So like I said, people, it's time to pick a side. Who are we going to pick? God bless you.
In Coachella there. Joining me now is Dr. Mark Harvey. He's an associate professor and director of graduate business programs at the University of St. Mary. He is also the author of Celebrity Influence, Politics, Persuasion, and Issue-Based Advocacy. So he is the perfect person to talk to about the subject and the question of how much do these big endorsements really matter in political elections?
Yeah, the answer is probably not much, or at least not that we can easily measure. If you ask most people how it is that they're going to vote, most of the time they're going to say, well, I don't know, it's gas prices, it's the economy, it's my party identification, right? They're not usually thinking about, like, what does Beyoncé think? So definitely not top of most people's minds. That's not to say that celebrities can't be influential. It's just very difficult to indicate. It may be a very individualized effect. So Oprah Winfrey, for example, we can measure was influential in terms of getting Barack Obama to become the Democratic nominee in 2008. But there's really no other cases out there where we can really say this celebrity endorsement created this particular outcome.
So what is it about that example, Oprah, for example? What do you think worked well with her celebrity in that election, that primary, that was so effective?
Yeah, well, it's hard for me to know that answer specifically, but I can tell you the kinds of things that I think give celebrities sort of a degree of credibility, right? Some has to do with expertise. Like if that celebrity has actually gone out and learned something about their subject and so on, it helps with their credibility. A lot of times if celebrities are involved in advocacy groups, so it's not just the celebrity, but it's sort of the machine of activists that are working with them, that also works. Another factor is the identity of the celebrity. So what I've looked at in some cases is the relationship between celebrity credibility and certain issues. And we find, for example, that Elton John and Ellen DeGeneres are far more credible on LGBTQ issues than any politicians, including presidents. I mean, Willie Nelson is most credible when it comes down to marijuana legalization, and he's known best as a pot smoker, right? In addition to his musicianship. So, it's really, some of it just has to do with whether or not there is a match. There was a great study done in the early 2000s about Jessica Simpson, and it concluded basically that she was great at selling perfume and bad at selling pocket knives. And I think you may see that because not all celebrities are equally good at selling all kinds of things. And maybe Oprah's just on brand for political advocacy, and maybe some others are not.
Yeah, I think Willie Nelson, by the way, also appearing with Kamala Harris in Houston. So we'll see if he gets her any additional votes. Let me ask, what about endorsements backfiring? So you've done recent research on Taylor Swift, who obviously endorsed Kamala Harris in September. And you say that it's possible that some endorsements actually demobilize people than really mobilize voters.
Yeah, that's correct. We did a study back in August before Taylor Swift actually did her endorsement to see whether or not she was able to inspire people to go vote for Democrats. And we found that the population that was most tuned into her and at least could be influenced would have been those Swifties who were undecided. And among those, we found that if she just says go vote, then they're more likely to register. But if she says vote for Democrats, then they're actually less likely to want to vote for Democrats. And so it's a little bit counterintuitive. But again, it could be just one of these questions about being on or off brand for Taylor Swift. I mean, I think there are lots of people who think she's very credible. She's a good businesswoman, and so on. And maybe in certain contexts, she would be a really good advocate. But in these really polemic races like that where people are really locked in, a lot of people just don't want to have their entertainment and music mixed with their politics.
Yeah, and I wonder if that also applies to brands, because you certainly don't have to look far to think about certain brands who have spoken about an issue or participated in some issue-based advocacy, and it can backfire if their clients or if their fans feel like this is kind of out of left field, or why are you weighing in?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And whenever a celebrity goes in and advocates for an issue or for a candidate, they are taking a risk of sorts, right? There is a concern that they may lose people at the margins. And that's one reason why sometimes it's the biggest celebrities that take those kinds of risks. I mean, when you're Taylor Swift and you're the biggest artist on the planet, you've got a little bit of margin maybe to lose a few fans if you're taking sides on things. Somebody like Chappell Rowan, who has had a lot of controversy by simply saying, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. She's on the younger side and not quite as influential and just kind of starting off her career. And so it's interesting sometimes to see how in some situations you can actually be punished for not taking a side.
Yeah, I wonder if I hear you say that what seems to be most effective is authenticity and credibility and less necessarily celebrity. Can you be more persuasive or effective if you don't have as much of a following, but the following that you do have really sort of believes what you say? They find you very credible. They find you very authentic.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. And that pinpoints a really important point, is that, celebrity, it's not just the fame, right? I mean, there's lots of famous people who can say lots of things, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to change people's minds. One of the things that a lot of entertainers have is the ability to connect with people through their art. And that does, I think, make them uniquely persuasive.
Really interesting. Well, whether it's effective or not, we may soon know. We it's hard to say, but certainly interesting to watch and great to have your insights today. Really interesting. Mark Harvey, thank you for the time.
Thanks a lot. It was great to be here.